Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. As part of the year-end series, The Big Picture has been looking at various aspects of what has happened in India in 2014. Today we are looking at one of the most important aspects, the media, and how it performed and how it was perceived. No one can deny that the focus during the year was as much on the media as it was on Narendra Modi before and after he became the Prime Minister. In fact, the two were so intertwined that one of my guests today even went on to write a book and focus on this aspect. It is time now, as the year ends and a new year dawns, to scrutinize the role of the media in all its formats and where it has reached and where it is heading. To discuss this, I have some of the best names in Indian journalism with me. I have Rajdeep Sardesai, one of India's top journalists, who is now consulting editor at the India Today Group. Nihal Singh, a veteran journalist who is known to be one of the best editors Indian journalism has seen. Siddhartha, Varadarajan, an eminent journalist and a former editor of The Hindu, and Saba, Naqvi, political editor, The Outlook magazine, who has been keeping a sharp eye on Indian politics for over 2 decades. Welcome to all of you. Rajdeep, you think one of the determining features in this year, as far as the media is concerned, is that they have stopped or, very reluctant to swim against the tide?
I think so. Girish, I think it is very clear that 2014 will go down as the year where the media was effectively, or a large section of it. I don't think we should, tar the entire media with the same brush, but the large section of it during the election campaign of 2014 became a cheerleader of the party that was ahead and of the individual that was ahead. Maybe in a way we were not responsible for the Modi wave. I think that would be giving us too much of importance, but I think we certainly rode on it. Certainly the television media did it to a large extent, the print media also to a certain extent, but I think we rode on the wave. We realized what was happening on the ground and we decided this was the momentum to go along with. We went with the tide rather than question or retain our sense of skepticism, which I believe is the basis of a true independent media.
Mr. Nihal Singh, would you agree with that? Do you think that at least, when you look at the media, it's very, I don't think we should be merging both the print and the television media because the two have,
I would largely
to some extent,
agree with it, but I must say that the striking moment for me was the coverage of Modi in New York by the Indian community. I've written about it too, but it is amazing the kind of coverage media gave Modi as if he was the great hero of the modern age. Without any criticism of any kind. It is amazing. I was flabbergasted, basically, as a media person. I've never seen this kind of coverage. Perhaps Mrs. Gandhi in her heydays, yes, but that too, not to this extent. So the partisan nature of the media, I think, is very much the case, and it is to be greatly regretted, I think.
So when you talk of partisanship of the media, Mr. Nihal Singh, are you talking about the entire media? Are you talking of only the television, or is it what about the print media? Do you think the print media has redeemed itself a little better than the television media?
Well, the print media, I think, did perform a little better, but there again, I think there was a fair amount of partisanship, depending on the newspaper you were reading and the owners you were serving. So I think the critical faculty was missing among a large section of the print media. And that is a great pity, I think, because one of the great mottos of media, especially the print media, is that you have to be objective, or try to be as objective as possible. And obviously that was not the case.
Saba? Saba, you have been in the print media long, though you make your guest appearances on television sometimes. Yeah. But the print media, let us keep the television aside. Print media, do you think that, what were the constraints for the print media? The constraints of television, I'm sure Rajdeep will again explain to us.
Even for print, it depends on the finances, actually. And where I work, for instance, we've really not been cheerleaders at all. And we have continued a very sustained, our positions have not changed, But we are talking about very small budgets, shrinking budgets in a magazine like Outlook. And but fundamentally, there are certain newspapers who have continued to do their breaking stories, such as the Indian Express Group, if we are into taking names. They've continued to do stories which are reporter-based, which would not make the current regime happy. So I would say certainly, whereas the whole nature of television media as such, that it seemed like a prolonged ad campaign and a promo. The nature, you put the BJP's own campaign on top of the way the media was just sort of projecting it. It seemed like a non-stop, Modi, 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 Modi. It went on and on like that. But, there is some level, and, okay, are we talking only English language, Girish?
No.
Then let me have a comment on the having done that, what was really stunning to my mind was what happened in the vernacular media when they ran with communal campaigns, when they actually became partisan in campaigns such as Love Jihad. And it was extraordinary to see that, and that is when one felt ashamed.
But this is not the first time it's happening in the vernacular media,
at least.
Media,
yeah.
Because, we have seen this in the late 80s, early 90s, we have seen this happening in the past.
It was the worst. They were propagating it, let alone the parties involved. They were propagating certain ideas. So they became the people who were fueling the thing, if anything was there to be fueled. They were creating the story, they were spreading the sort of divisions, they were propagating it, and they just went on and on. And I noticed it, I particularly tracked the Love Jihad campaign. One can't watch everything all the time. But I did not see that in the English language media, English, print or television.
Okay. Siddharth, my question is this. I had asked him about, the media swimming against the tide. It has lost its sense of swimming against the tide, but has it also become a tool of the PR? PR has always tried to influence media, but have we reached a stage where virtually, except some honorable exceptions, the media has become a tool of the PR?
But I think this trend has been there for a long time. I think the corporate sector, for example, has been fairly effective in ensuring that coverage of itself for particular companies, Reliance, for example, very active PR, so that negative stories don't appear. What we've seen in the last year and a half or 2 years is the use of this PR machinery by political parties, and the party that has excelled in using this the most is the BJP. But I want to make 2 points before we discuss this further. The division between print and television, I think, is an artificial one today, in the sense that what we have and what we're confronting is a media ecosystem where print, television and the online media feed off each other.
Right.
A trend which, so in other words, it's not...
The convergence.
There is a convergence and issues get transmitted from one level to the other. What's happening now is not the complete absence of critical reporting. Saba mentioned the Indian Express. There are other examples, and in virtually every paper or TV channel, you have individual reporters who are doing great work, right? What's not happening, however, is that those stories do not become, they don't acquire the prominence that they ought to in that media ecosystem. So that a great story in the Express, which ordinarily should have become a topic for discussion on all channels in the evening, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Either because...
Whenever it's not convenient to them.
Well, I think here we have to factor in the predilection or biases of media owners, the individual biases of some editors as well, particularly editors who have begun to straddle the division between proprietor and editor. The biases of the corporate sector as a whole, which provides a lion's share of advertising. The unwillingness of media companies to spend money on news gathering.
Right.
All of these are factors which are contributing to a colossal failure of the media to ask the right questions. And I think that this is a year where we have reached a low point, and it's rather dangerous, quite frankly.
Rajdeep, why is it that the television, let's talk of television, why is it that television is simply unable to resist this PR onslaught?
Look, I don't think, you should sort of single out television.
Sorry, I'll reframe the question. The PR onslaught is a reality.
Do we use the word PR? I don't know what, PR in the conventional sense. If you remember, PR in the conventional sense was someone on Diwali day would come with a suit piece to all the reporters. I remember when I was at the Times of India who covered the stock market.
Right.
That was PR in the conventional sense. I think the lines have got blurred, and they've been blurred over a period of time. Media ecosystem is partly responsible, but look at what has happened, Girish. For example, if a film is being promoted, you will have the film stars, they will come to the studio. If you want access to those film stars, it has to be done in a particular way. It's happening with our sports stars. With our politicians also, access has become critical. Politicians now give access particularly to those who they feel in some way will toe a particular line.
Right.
Because what is it that a politician can prevent a journalist who's critical or skeptical? He can prevent access in some way. Now, do you call that PR? It is part, I believe, of this larger ecosystem wherein the lines between editor-proprietor have been blurred, wherein the lines between the corporate ownership and the newsroom have been blurred. As a result, what has happened, the capacity of the individual journalist to truly have an independent position which he can say without fear or favor is shrinking. And it's shrinking right across the space. It just so happened that this was an election year, and therefore it has got magnified in terms of the political impact of it. But it's happening on a day-to-day basis, whether it is corporate world, whether it's film stars, whether it is sports. Our capacity to question has been reduced, has been systematically reduced over a period of time, I believe.
I think where television has a specific, culpability here is because
television's
it's a visual
ecosystem. We have to.
It's a visual medium, right?
Yes, exactly.
So a newspaper can get by without having an interview with Mr. Jaitley or some minister who says, "I won't give you an interview if you're going to ask me tough questions," right? TV channels, when every channel is competing for those ministers or for film stars or for sports people, the nature of the medium is such that there's a tendency to buckle.
But the problem of TV, I would say, Girish and Siddhartha, more is trivialization.
Exactly.
And the ability to sensationalize and play on prejudice.
Right.
You see, that is the bigger challenge. I don't believe television's challenge at the moment is as much of the PR machine, because, there's only so much that a PR machine can do in a 24-hour wheel where the news is moving very swiftly. But it is television's inability to focus on news gathering and instead focus on the trivial, on the sensational, and on petty prejudice, which is the worry, which to my mind is the deeper worry and the deeper crisis.
Is it because it's cheaper?
Yes, absolutely. It again boils down to the business model. But I don't think that can be used as an excuse. I think television is working because in this particular way because the journalists who head many television organizations or their proprietors or the editors have lost their moral compass. They are simply looking at it as a TRP machine.
Absolutely. I would like Mr. Nihal Singh on this moral compass business. Yes.
Also this one problem with the television format about prejudice, as Rajdeep mentioned, is that the simplest show to pull off is two Muslims with a beard. Two Hindus there, and they have
with
a
tilak and a saffron.
With the tilak. Yeah. So it sort of plays into and sustains.
No, we've seen it in the conversion debate at the moment. Yeah. We are getting only the most extreme voices, the most insane voices, who will play and prey on prejudice because that they will create enough noise for you to in some way sensationalize the issue.
Mr. Nihal Singh, the moral compass. That's what what Rajdeep talks about. Is that the biggest casualty now?
No, I agree with Rajdeep, except to emphasize that what has happened with the change of government, as far as media is concerned, is going several steps back. Because what has happened is he was talking about access, which is a very important aspect of a journalist's life, especially if you're on the reporting side, whether for print or for television.
Right.
But what has now happened is that as a matter of policy, the highest person in politically, the boss, Narendra Modi, has initiated a one-way access problem.
Absolutely.
And that is the great danger because, you use modern technology, fine, but you use it as a one-way communication. You have either a controlled set of interviews, as he did at the beginning, highly controlled, or you have his message getting through without being challenged,
without being questioned
by the media or representatives of the media.
Without being questioned, Siddhartha, without being questioned.
See, all of us,
the tweets are there, the Facebook messages are there. We are expected to carry that, no questioning.
Exactly. All of us saw and have written. Rajdeep has written. I've written the Diwali Milan function that the Prime Minister had with journalists. Right now, here's a Prime Minister who has not answered questions on the record since he became PM, other than I think to one delegation of foreign journalists and to Fareed Zakaria. when Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister. Now, we pilloried him for being a man of few words.
Right.
But I cannot recall a single occasion when he was present with journalists where journalists didn't pepper him with questions.
Right.
He may have chosen not to answer or he may have ducked, but the questions were always asked. Mr. Modi's function at the Diwali Milan, he said, I won't take questions, and every journalist buckled and they were busy taking selfies. So if that's going to be the attitude, I think, where, you have this one-way communication, no questions, can be put to him, let alone answered, then you have a problem. I think that the lack of access, quite frankly, is an opportunity for journalism to rediscover what it really ought to be about.
That's exactly. Rajdeep, lack of access into all these things are a serious problem. But my question is that, we are talking of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, his way of functioning, using social media and all these things. But is it becoming a trend? You see other people also behaving in the similar fashion?
No, you see, look, Mayawati, for example, doesn't do it.
No, for example, corporates. Do you get access? Can you access corporate?
No, you perhaps cannot. And, the word access will be used by sort of Modi's supporters to say, serves journalists right. Who are they to, have this access in the first place? I don't think we are asking for access in terms of asking for a favor. There is a belief that if you are in public life, you must take questions.
Absolutely.
You see, I think that was the basic principle under which, someone in public life and someone who was a journalist functioned.
Right.
Now, that kind of relationship is being broken in this present day, and more and more people, more and more politicians are doing one-way communication because they believe increasingly in a controlled media. I was told the other day that the Prime Minister told apparently some of his ministers, why are you speaking so often to the media? You don't need to speak to the media so often. And that is troubling. No one is asking, for them to be available as and when we want. But surely you expect every now and then, if you're covering a beat, to be able to ask questions of the minister and it's not just Mr. Modi. It has to do with several
absolutely, that's what
and also several chief ministers, not just in the government, but in other parties.
I must come in as someone who has covered, who regularly goes, and so have you, who regularly goes and engages with them. The access to the others is not so difficult.
No, but do they answer questions on record?
Where was Sonia Gandhi answering anything
exactly
for years? I mean, let's not go there.
That's right. Sonia Gandhi was in the same boat. Agreed.
In the same boat. Where was she answering? And you have to take the trouble to. You can meet people.
No,
it's not that they are not.
Rahul Gandhi.
Where is Rahul Gandhi taking questions?
But I want to make another point. The problem here, and also Mr. Modi has met journalists, economic journalists and strategic journalists. He's had conversations with them. Yes, that's fine. Siddhartha, I'm just getting, I'm getting to a point here. The difference is, you have somebody who is operating like as if he's the president of the country. He speaks Man Ki Baat. He gives a lecture a day. Every day you get a PIB alert saying the Prime Minister of India greets the people of Japan. The Prime Minister of India greets the people of Qatar. Yesterday, all of this is going on while these debates on conversion are going on in Parliament, and he will not speak.
And Israel in Hebrew.
And he will not speak in Parliament because so this is a certain arrogance, and he's being told by his people not to. But, this whole question, so we have a larger problem in our democratic system about many leaders who do not speak.
No, that is exactly, that's exactly, Mr. Nihal.
In fact, Girish, as a party, I'll tell you this, I have nothing, the BJP is a very talkative party.
Sure.
It's one of the easiest parties to actually get people to talk.
Mr. Nihal saying, this whole business of access, being, having to answer questions, and now what has happened now, all of them are talking. How much are the journalists responsible for this state of affairs?
I would like to go back to the days of Indira Gandhi.
Right.
Everybody knew how imperious she was or she could be. But as a matter of routine, there were several occasions that I would interact with her and she would interact.
Right.
Off the record, as is always the case, if you are talking frankly with a politician. And she could be charming, and she could also be devastating. But here was a personal relationship of sorts that I, as a journalist, and she, as a Prime Minister, could interact and ask her real questions, and not the sophisticated sort of PR kind of questions. And she was a very powerful person and a very powerful Prime Minister. That is totally absent today.
Okay.
And, of course, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when he was in office, He was a very reticent kind of a man. But even he interacted off the record on a fairly regular basis with X number of journalists.
No, but we are talking about on the record.
No, but even on the record.
On the record, there was
Manmohan Singh made seven. No, Manmohan Singh made 7 foreign trips a year on average. Each of those trips, he took questions.
He took questions on the way. Rajdeep,
I was talking about the domestic conferences.
Siddhartha was talking about this becoming an opportunity for us. The kind of atmosphere which we are, people not answering questions, people directly addressing the people through whatever social media or radio, all these things. You think that journalists at present are equipped to deal with this kind of a situation or rediscover themselves?
That's a good question, because I think we can blame the politician, but what about us as journalists?
Absolutely.
I think when we are asked, to take what was said during the emergency years, when we are asked to bend, we are ready to crawl today. The kind of people, the kind of appointments which are made in important editorial positions are often not determined by the merit of the individual, but how proximate is that individual to a particular party or a particular individual. Then that person decides, in a sense, the line which is to be taken, and any journalist who wants to question that is necessarily not given the kind of importance that he or she should be given. So I think as journalists also, somehow we are also falling into this trap. Politicians are intolerant of criticism. Politicians perhaps, treat us with contempt. And that's part of, we have to learn to deal with it. We've got to learn to deal with it. But as journalists, we have simply, I think, failed to try and address what is our core function. Our core function is to bring the truth out. Instead of that, we are so worried about, who are we going to upset? Yes. Interest groups, pressure groups. I think we have, as a result, failed to provide the news as it should be provided, which is the news without all the garnishing, without all the sensation, and instead, in television at least, the way we are tackling it is to trivialize a very serious issue.
Trivialize and look at the TRP.
Yeah, that's very worrying.
If I just add to what I'm saying, the way you get the truth out is not by seeking and getting privileged access to a minister or the prime minister. Because
absolutely.
They're the last ones. I'm not talking about just this PM. Anybody in power is the last person who wants the truth to come out.
Exactly.
So the truth comes out through,
not through access. Not through access.
Old-fashioned reporting of the kind Saba has excelled in, other colleagues have excelled in, but which editors and proprietors increasingly frown upon.
Right.
They don't want certain difficult questions to be asked. And over a period of time, reporters have got out of the habit of asking those questions when the opportunity presents itself. When you confront somebody in authority, you should be able to ask a question, not because that person is necessarily going to give the answer, but sometimes not giving the answer or refusing to answer tells you a lot more. I would have preferred if, even though Mr. Modi at the Diwali Milan said, I won't take questions, instead of taking selfies, if people use their handheld phones
to ask a
question and record his discomfiture or his refusal to answer those questions. That would have been a far more accurate reflection of the Prime Minister's relationship with journalism, the way it ought to be, than what we saw finally.
Yes.
There is a problem with journalists, because I think the best journalists are those who actually keep some distance and dignity away from people. The minute you start imagining that you're going to be advising ex-Prime Minister or by Prime Minister, sooner or later you're going to lose the plot. So, and that has been a trend in India for years and years. So is to keep a distance. Is if it's possible, but the circumstances in television stations, in some publications is becoming, it's harder and harder for journalists.
But at the same time, let's be fair, stories are coming out. For example, look at this Christmas controversy. Yeah. The Times of India did put out the story and did find that the government was on the wrong foot. So I do believe, looking ahead to 2015, honeymoon periods last.
Honeymoon period for the government is last.
Honeymoon period for the government, and I think even journalists who, as I said, have lost their moral compass, eventually pressure from the peer group, pressure from civil society will force us to rediscover ourselves. I am hopeful. I am hopeful that eventually, just as competition also drives us to the lowest common denominator, eventually peer group pressure will also force us to every now and then do the good story. It may not be as often as it used to be in the past, but we'll still do it.
Mr. Nihal Singh, are you optimistic? As optimistic as Rajdeep is?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as he is, because, probably the problem is, I remember the old days when I started journalism, almost started as a staff reporter of the Statesman. We had our editors fighting people who wanted to influence a local report. And it was always the reporter who won, if he was on solid grounds. Now, that is no longer the case. So part of the problem is of course, the corporate world, having assumed much greater powers in terms of influencing their publications and television channels. That is one problem. And I don't think we can get rid of it, because after
Absolutely.
all, especially in television.
Think, sir, I think you have raised a very important issue. We'll discuss that. But before that, we'll go into a very short break. Now, please keep watching this fascinating discussion. We'll come back very soon. Welcome back. As part of the year-ender series, we are discussing what has happened in this country on the media front and, Rajdeep, corporatization, what Mr. Nihal Singh talks about. Corporatization of the media, this year especially, we have seen some dramatic things happening, monoliths getting formed in the media. You yourself have been, if I may use the word victim, you have been a victim of it. So you think, how do you look at this? Is there a future to the media without the corporates?
Look, I'm among those who believe that at the end of the day, you will, not just in this country, but across the world, you do have big business which does enter the media, which does take, stakes in big media houses. Most of there was the jute press in the 1950s. Now you have another kind of corporate which is entering the media. The worry that I have is when they enter the newsroom. You see, as long as you remain, a benign corporate which wants to invest in the media, I would have perhaps no problem. It would not, to my mind, be seen as malified per se. But the moment it enters the newsroom...
And it has entered.
And it has entered. Let's be very clear.
If I may say so...
Let him finish.
No,
Saba.
in Rajdeep's case, yours was this particular business house which had agendas which was being targeted.
And
that's what happened in that particular
Saba, let him finish.
No, my fear is that when you enter the newsroom, when you take decisions based on your corporate interests as to which story should be shown, who should be projected, then I have a problem. Otherwise, a corporate today, perhaps, which has the sort of might of money to try and invest in news gathering. I would like to see corporates saying that we are committing ourselves to setting up an independent trust, let's say. 3 or 4 corporates come and say, we are setting up an independent media trust. We are appointing some of the most distinguished people as part of this trust. And they will now ensure an element of autonomy as well as give news gathering the kind of due it deserves. That's not happening. Instead, what is happening is what are seen as hostile takeovers.
Absolutely.
And that, to my mind, is then seen as driving particular agendas, because most of our corporates, like it or not, are virtually, if I may say so, cohabiting with the government in power or at some level or the other. So their stakes are so much higher that the newsroom, somewhere down the line, is bound to get affected.
Siddhartha, media, as we have known, he spoke about the jute press and things like that. I'm sure Mr. Nihal Singh will tell us a little more about his own experiences with the jute press. But media has become a business for the corporates. So how can they change? Will they change at all? For them, money, how much money they are making is more important, as Rajdeep himself has seen in your own,
And before just one point, sorry Siddhartha, is that, you've got in certain cases, why only blame the big corporates entering? You've got established newspapers and business houses, also established news houses dabbling into other businesses where conflicts of interest emerge. It's conflict of interest which lies at the heart of news decisions being in some way subverted.
Yes, Siddhartha.
See, the problem is that the media as an industry is operating on a very, very flimsy economic model or business model, which does not allow news generation and news dissemination to earn a profit. Right? So the profits have to come from somewhere else. It comes from advertising. It comes from secondary business activities, which invariably compromise the nature of the news gathering enterprise. And we've seen example after example of this. Some media house wants to have a public event where they want to invite the Prime Minister, some forum or the other. So for 6 months, until the PM says yes or no, reporters are told, be careful, right? Because otherwise PM won't come. This is a minor example, but you have companies which have massive interests in the power sector and mining, who have huge stakes riding on goodwill with the government.
Right.
So, and I would say, as the point Rajdeep made, that some of our largest media houses, Times of India, Hindustan Times, for example, I would say the bulk of their earnings now come from non-media activity, right? From holdings of mutual funds, from what they call these private treaties, equity that they've generated, other kinds of investments. So somewhere down the line, I think we need to be clear that corporatization is going to compromise journalistic integrity.
Paid news. Yeah,
Girish, just one thing. I think conventional media, where there is news gathering, which we all of us have been journalists who would like to see that, just does not make money. So, you know, it is not. So now
news gathering has never made money. Intended to
so
make money.
Either you had the old-fashioned commitment to it, and owners were willing to put in the money into that. But now, you know, it's people own media outlets, big, small, English or in the vernacular, as a way to extort on their other businesses.
Actually, Rajdeep, you know, vernacular, she said, I want, you know, since you have had such exposure to both the Hindi and the English media, you've seen it from very close quarters. Do you see a difference in the approach?
I think so, and worryingly so, because, you know, I've seen these regional channels particularly, the pressures that they are under.
Yeah.
Some of them, you know, either the editor becomes a blackmailer, where he blackmails the political class, or the political class itself is so incestuous with the, with whoever are the owners, that it is impossible for the individual journalist, and there are very good journalists there.
Absolutely.
The quality of journalists and the stories that they do are very good, but sooner or later,
in the language,
but sooner or later there's a conflict of interest, and that conflict of interest comes in a manner that makes it impossible to retain the sense of idealism. And it has become a business model which is based, in a sense, on extortion at times.
Absolutely. And this year has seen the worst, as Siddhartha was talking about. We've reached the depths as far as...
Because, Girish, this year was an election
year.
And because during elections, you were mentioning, you briefly used the word paid news. During elections, you find that problem getting magnified because a political party or an individual knows that this is where the media house is most vulnerable, and the media house knows this is where the political party and the politician is most vulnerable. So it's a perfectly incestuous relationship that is being carried out at the moment.
Mr. Nihal Singh, I'll come to you, Saba. Mr. Nihal Singh, jute press versus the corporate press. How do you distinguish that?
No, I think one of the greatest deficiencies of Indian media, both print and television, is that they do not spend the money where they should spend, which is in having their own men in key positions around the world, which means what? You either depend upon usually Western news agencies,
right,
and try to get along. This is one of the great deficiencies. They'll throw money for extraneous things, jamborees and so on.
Huge money is spent, earned.
It's earned. Conclaves are an earning. Yeah. You earn money through conclaves.
So no, sir. My question is, the jute press, the owners of the jute press, the owners of the corporate media now, how would you distinguish them?
Well, you distinguish them from their different tastes in terms of, flashy cars and good surroundings and so on. Whereas the jute press owner lived very poorly. And in a sense, the Ramnath Goenka was an epitome of that kind of jute press owner.
Okay. No, there's a good point there. Look at the Times of India, for example. It emerged out of the jute press, but at the end of the day, it's made news, media, its core business.
Right.
As a result,
not anymore. I mean, it's transited.
There was a time. But at the end of the day, Siddhartha, I think the Times of India knows that its legitimacy as a brand is dependent on the Times of India retaining a measure of credibility.
True, but
in a strange sort of way, therefore, they are forced to remain a little bit more independent than other media would be because of their size and because they know that their core brand is...
Size allows their independence, but the Bennett Coleman Group has been through a cycle where in the 80s and 90s they shed all the collateral businesses.
Right.
But over the last 10 years have acquired significant non-media interest. But I agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the credibility of the flagship Times of India.
And they are powerful enough not to be pushed around so much.
Coming to the aspect of paid news.
Yeah.
This is something which the print media is also, very much part. In fact, if I am not wrong, the print media invented it. The television channels only took it up after that.
As Rajdeep was talking about, during the election there was this incestuous relationship. Also, people thought that an election is a time when so much money, legitimate and illegitimate, gets into the market that all these little papers wanted a piece of the advertising.
No, not just little papers. It's the huge paper, huge media houses.
What is very, you must be a little. I'm talking now. I'm going down now, starting from and you had these stories of local candidates being asked to shell out money by small regional journalists to get a story or the rallies covered. So our paid news, the journalism as a means of extortion is also something that we must worry about very seriously.
But my bigger worry is, for example, if the proprietor of a top media house is openly sharing a political rally platform with a prime ministerial candidate.
Yes.
What is the message then which is going out to the journalists of that organization?
Yes.
You know, and this is happening again and again. You know, look at in the Northeast, for example, most of the channels are owned by politicians.
Right.
Now you have the practice where someone who's been a media proprietor for for a period of time then believes that he's powerful enough to actually either want a ticket or actually want to in some way openly propagate an ideology, and it's all happening openly.
No,
what happens to the journalist then who works for that organization?
On the positive side, this year there's been two initiatives. One by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. Mr. Khullar has put out a marvelous discussion paper.
Yes, and
Justice A.P. Shah of the Law Commission has had, I think that to have these semi-autonomous or autonomous bodies flag media freedom and the dangers that corporatization have, and to put this into the public domain I think it's a great contribution. Sadly, there hasn't been enough debate
in the
media. I think we've talked about it here at RSTV. There's been a few other discussions, but I think there is growing awareness of what this unholy nexus is doing. And they've made a number of proposals which I think ought to be quite easy to implement.
But what happens to that? That, for example, the Press Council of India brought out the report on paid news. Eventually, that report was not even sort of looked at. Yeah. It was junked by the Indian Newspaper Society, for example, which refused to accept that report. How do you then deal with that?
Rajdeep, my question to all of you is this: do you think the journalists will develop the backbone to resist any of these things? Do they have the capacity to resist it at all?
What do you expect of a young journalist who's earning,
not just young journalists,
even senior journalists? You see, it requires, there is a comfort zone that we are all in. No. To shake us out of our comfort zone takes a lot. We don't want, let's be honest, we are not even a collective anymore. Absolutely. Everyone operates, in their own individual little sort of islands.
Under their own individual contracts.
And everyone is striking their own deals, their own compromises. Let's be honest, we are a badly compromised profession at the moment. And because we are badly compromised, I don't think we have the capacity at the moment to resist the external pressures.
No, but I think broadly, yes, we should be worried. But many people who are drawn to journalism are drawn to it not because they're there to extort money or because they're there to make a packet. It's because journalism offers you a platform to also share a certain level of idealism. You want to cover things which do not routinely get covered.
In fact,
there are still, Girish, I want to say there are many journalists need protection. There's no sort of protection for their wages, and there are many good idealistic people in journalism who do resist.
But the space they may have to find then is digital. Because they may not find it in conventional, they may not find it in conventional media.
Coming to that, in fact, that's what I wanted to discuss. Siddhartha, digital space, is that the alternative now? And because so far we have not seen a business model which can click as far as the digital space is concerned.
There is no viable digital model, business model for digital media in India, I dare say even in the world. Western companies have been a little bit more successful in having paywalls because they have a paywall for print. Right? Here, most papers are sold for virtually nothing. So there's no paywall that exists.
Also all the newspapers are available free on the net.
So, but I think what digital does is that it has given an opportunity for the public at large. Sadly, that also includes motivated and sometimes abusive, political activists. But the public at large has now a platform and a method to ventilate grievances, to call out some of the abuses that they see in the media. And I dare say it provides journalists also an opportunity to put things in the public domain, even if their own publications are reluctant.
How many of them can actually do it?
I'm thinking that there are ways, and technology allows.
The Times of India has told its journalists that they can't put it out.
I'll give you an example. Times of India ran a story on a conflict of interest involving one of Mr. Jaitley's nieces and one of his lawyer friends, who's part of a panel set up by the Commerce Ministry on intellectual property policy. somehow the story was pulled out by the Times of India from the internet.
Right.
From its internet. But a cached version existed and it was circulating everywhere. So the story never died.
No, but they know how long can this kind of stealth?
It's not stealth. I think it's essential. And here I want to offer advice to journalists, anybody out there, if you're watching the program, stand your ground. You know, in the sense that obviously you can't, you have to pick your battles. But you can't, so not everything is an issue on which you would resign or walk away.
Absolutely.
But you please make it as difficult as possible for your superior to flout journalistic ethics.
Mr. Nihal Singh, I'm sure in your times this just did not exist. Social media, is that some kind of a alternative for journalists who want to stand up, who wants to face, who wants to resist the onslaught of both the corporatization and the politicization of the media?
Well, I think the most telling aspect of the Indian media is that one of the biggest newspaper empires has dispensed with the editorship. There is no real editor. So where do you go from there? And that is a stark fact we all have to face. And, well, there are various ways you can try to correct this. But if you know that there is no real editor to talk to or to take decisions, where do you go from there? I think this is a reprehensible step that has been taken and institutionalized.
Yes, I mean,
it's true. The role of the editor has diminished. It's not, again, none of this happened in 2014. Let's be honest. All this has been happening over the last
2014 seemed to have come to a boil, actually.
No, I think 2014, because Narendra Modi has acquired this larger-than-life character. All the ills of the media also are sometimes heaped on it. Let's be clear. Narendra Modi has not compromised editorial freedom. Editorial freedom got compromised over a sustained period over the last 20-25 years. And I think we have been willing participants. We've watched it. Either we've got co-opted, or we've simply winked at it, or we've or we've sort of
or some people
expressed our anguish.
Or some people were got rid of.
Yeah, so we've got to live with that. But I think what happens is that I do believe that the one good thing is that whether you're a viewer or a reader, credibility at some stage does matter. In some strange way. And it's not something which you can buy off the shelf. I think too many people must...
I have a question, Rajdeep. In the television channels, when discussions take place at the topmost level, do they talk of TRP or do they talk of credibility?
No, I think a lot of them do talk, unfortunately, of TRP. Too many of them do talk of TRP. I do believe that, but if you have a strong editor, that's where the strong editor comes. When the strong editor is there, he will try and push either the proprietor or his journalist below to push for credibility. When you abandon that entire role of the editor as gatekeeper, that's when TRP takes over. That's what happened with newspapers. How did the advertising person become so dominant in most newspapers? Because the editor abandoned the space, that sacred space in a sense. So if that sacred space is also abandoned in television channels, then naturally the marketing man or the distribution person is going to say, where are your TRPs? If you don't get TRPs, remove the show. And that's exactly what's happening.
Which has happened, Siddhartha, in the print media especially. Is still credibility a thing which is discussed at the topmost level, and what kind of pressure the marketing, the advertising guys bring in?
No, credibility is absolutely fundamental for any newspaper.
Is it discussed?
Of course there is. I mean, no, it is. I mean, in the sense that, but you have papers and you have papers. At the Hindu, which is the paper that I edited, but that was the tradition even earlier, and it continues. The marketing department does not have the kind of say in editorial decision making that it may have say in the Times of India or the Hindustan Times. So, but there again, depending on the person to whom a certain demand is put, you have a very different outcome. Even in the Times of India, I have seen, I worked in Times of India for 8 or 9 years. Yes. I have seen, individual reporters at fairly mid-level put their foot down and say, sorry, this can't happen. And so it may still happen, but it happens in a modified way. It happens in a difficult sort of way. It's embarrassing for everybody. So that's why I say that there is capacity to resist this, but unfortunately, many of the decisions in the larger papers, the more corporatized they are, tend to be taken, and so credibility does, take a beating. And there are other factors that come in, as I said, because you have all of these business considerations.
Rajdeep, social media, is that the alternative? I'm not saying alternative to the mainstream media, but nowadays we see journalists increasingly dependent on the social media.
that is also troubling. It's what I call, one of the developments of 2014, or it started about
you are tweeting all the time.
No, you look at the Twitter hashtags.
Yes.
What is the hashtag which is trending
and that
becomes the basis of your prime time agenda in the evening. And I think the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, was intelligent enough. He put his social media team in place there because he knew that through social media, he could set the narrative.
Yes.
If there was no social media, then the mainstream media might have questioned, challenged him a bit more. And, full marks to him because he was able to realize what role the social media was playing on the minds of otherwise, perfectly sane journalists. So, social media is a double-edged sword. At one stage, as Siddhartha says, it can be a space where you can bring out stuff which otherwise may not find space in the mainstream media. I just saw a story, for example, last week on something about a senior minister, which I don't think the newspapers really covered, but is out there on social media and is trending. But when it comes to mainstream media tracking social media with such with such relentless focus, I think it prevents us from thinking on our own.
Saba, the first victim casualty of would become the larger world out there. We are only talking of what's happening on Twitter and social media.
Because we will never have a story on Chhattisgarh sterilization.
Exactly.
Chhattisgarh sterilization deaths take place. It doesn't reflect on social media.
Girish, I'll go as far as to say that, we should really find a balance because there are journalists who just follow what's happening on Twitter.
Exactly.
And when they come into face-to-face with a journalist who's actually telling you what's happening, but it's not on Twitter. Now, what on earth are you going to do about that reality? If, it's not on Twitter, what can I do about it? Because you're only tracking Twitter. That's one thing. But about television news, if I may say this, increasingly in the vernacular media and all, it's no longer really about news. It's about tamasha. It's about reality television.
And it's also
highly
opinionated. I mean, I strongly resent the opinionated tone that reporters increasingly adopt. Editors and anchors adopt.
This is on television, and it's seeping into print also.
Exactly. But the worrying part is that the saner model, the saner conversation model, is not getting the TRPs. It's this sort of stuff that's getting the TRPs.
Rajya Sabha TV doesn't get into TRP. Anyway, we are not into that game at least.
Therefore, it's great. In a way, it's great to have a Rajya Sabha TV because you are able to create an island in a world of chaos around yourself.
Absolutely. Mr. Nihal Singh, this is a strange world for you where, reporters depend on Twitter tweets to, decide what kind of stories they will do or what they want to do.
No, but I think that should be a challenge for us, newspapermen, in real terms, to do a better job than we're doing, whether it's print or television. But the constraints are obvious, and we can't look away from that. But instead of the social media setting the agenda, as Rajdeep suggests, which is true, we should rev up ourselves in terms of producing the kind of compelling stories that will hook the reader or the viewer. And I don't think we are doing it on a sufficient scale. I must say there are some good stories, investigative stories run by newspapers and television channels, and kudos to them. But I think we have to do it on a much greater scale than we are doing.
Okay, Rajdeep, quickly we have to wrap up now. Media monoliths have become a reality. How do we deal with it?
Look, media monoliths are a reality, but I still have, again, as I say, the glass is half full because this is a very diverse country. At the end of the day, the sheer diversity, the plurality will mean that there will always be, either a small paper somewhere spring up or a website or a, or a television channel. Television, I fear for
television.
I fear because of the business model. The amount of money that you need to invest in a television channel.
You're talking about it. I just have a small question. You think that as some people would say, vulgar salaries which are there, vulgar pay packages which are there in the television channels, is that part of the problem of this?
I think if journalists are paid well, no problem with that. Who is to define what is vulgar? Who is to define what is vulgar? So it's not about the salaries. I think at the end of the day, even in television channels, if the people at the very top realize that, being in the media is very different to any other business, I think we still have hope. I think the moment we also feel that we are just an extension of this larger commercial enterprise that we all live in, then we are in trouble, because then TRPs will influence, then bottom lines will influence us, then we will decide, will a conversation approach work, or do I need 5 people to fight, because that is the only way in which I can retain viewer attention. So I'm still hopeful in the intelligence of the people at the top at some level in this media. Even if there are 5 people, I believe they will act as guerrillas in our media.
Saba.
Well, I think, as a journalist, credibility is so important, because you can be part of a tamasha, you can get sold out, you can do anything. You can become an editor because of, following a certain path which is not exactly what journalism was intended to be, but you will not have credibility at the end of it.
Credibility is there. Siddharth?
Well, I'm involved with a few colleagues in creating in a new project following the model of a trust to present objective, independent journalism. And I do believe that this is the future of Indian journalism, because you need to create spaces that are independent of political and corporate pressure. Those spaces are shrinking. The pressure is increasing from all of these quarters. And unless we are able to create these spaces and nurture them and develop an alternative ecosystem that in the final analysis will be more professional and more mainstream than our existing mainstream media, the impact of this on Indian democracy is something that one needs to worry about.
Okay, I think on that very hopeful note, what Siddharth says, we will hopefully the next year we will see this initiative which he and his friends are taking will come up. But it has been a fascinating discussion. Hopefully the Indian media will be better off in the coming year. We'll all wait and watch. Rajdeep is an optimist. All of us need to be optimists. Thanks to all my guests, Nihal, Singh, Rajdeep, Sardesai, Saba, Naqvi and Siddhartha, Varadarajan. Please keep watching. We'll come up with another issue on the big picture same time.